Okay, fantastic. All right. So tonight, obviously, we're talking about writing grants. And as you can see, I love seeing this first slide always because we get a sense of where we are at and where we're going. And we're still within this succeeding part of our course. And so far, out of this section, we've covered managing a meeting, conflict, communication skills. And as Evie was reviewing earlier, last week's focus was on social media. So now we're moving on to writing grants. And it's an area that I enjoy talking about. It's had some success in securing grants for my own line of research. So I'm excited to talk about this topic with all of you. And then after this week, we have two more substantive topics of engaging local government and leadership styles. And then basically the rest of the course, it's coming to a quick end, is going to focus on your group projects, as you can see in this last box here of application. And then moving on to celebrating our course and the success of all of your community projects. But for now, we're again focused on writing grants. So our goals for tonight is to get a basic understanding of grant writing, what it is, what is an encompass, what are the various components of a grant, and what's the process of submitting, and then what happens afterwards, and really just the overall point and purpose of grants for the work that all of you might be doing out in the community. And so our second goal is to learn more about preparing the grant itself by framing the community issue and by strategizing. So putting into practice some of the things that we've already covered earlier in this course based on chapter 1 and chapter 4. And then hopefully that what we're covering tonight will be helpful and resourceful in your next step of writing a grant. And specifically, we're encouraging all of you to complete a WLI community grant application. We've just received the application recently, so I believe it's on Canvas, and we're going to make it available to all of you. And the point of this grant is for you to put into practice hopefully some aspects of your community projects that you're working on now. So again, we're focusing on grant writing and then hopefully using some of that skills that we're talking about tonight to put together a WLI community grants application. All right, so a quick overview of grant writing. So, generally when we talk about a grant, we're referring to a block of funding, a set of resources, of financial resources that are provided for a very specific purpose. And so as you all were sort of noting earlier when I was asking that sort of icebreaker question of what are the various types, there's a variety of them out there that are focused on health, on human services, on education, on community building, and a variety of others. And the funding within those areas are specifically targeting, either a particular program or area of work within that sort of subfield to advance a specific mission of that organization that is trying to fund that project. So again, a grant is basically a block of funding that a funder is providing you and your organization or group or what have you, those financial resources to achieve some very specific purpose that's within the mission of that grant funder. Funders use grants to determine if they're going to provide financial support. They also use grants to hold recipients accountable for expected outcomes. Usually when you apply for a grant and you get those resources, you're going to get likely a contract or some sort of agreement document that is laying out the specific ways by which you can use these resources and what they're expecting out of you after those resources are expended. And usually they'll ask something like a report for your sort of efforts in the community. They want to know about the degree to which you were successful in implementing any of your community goals and things of the like. So the instrument of a grant is also used again to hold you accountable for very specific outcomes. In the US, there's also federal grants, so those coming from at the national level from national organizations and departments that are specifically economic aid that is provided to nonprofit organizations, local governments, and others in order to implement some sort of federal initiative. On top of these sort of federal aids that are out there in the form of grants, there's also a lot of nonprofit organizations such as foundations, just charitable organizations and others that are focused on providing grants for local efforts and others as well. And one good source for all of you as maybe perhaps a start to get a sense of like what's out there in terms of grants, it's the foundation directory. In fact, all of you as students of the U of U have access to the foundation directory license through the Marriott Library. And so that's an amazing resource where you can do just a broad search to get a sense of what's out there in terms of potential funders, what the application looks like, what the objectives of that fund is, deadlines, who to contact, and things like that. In fact, that same source can even tell you the types of organizations and projects that that funder has funded in the past. So that's another good source for all of you. Again, that's the foundation directory, and it's available to all of you through the U of U's library. And then the last point here, I would totally agree with the idea that finding funds it's an adventure. It's a process that is very intricate, time consuming, of trying to filter what opportunities make sense for you, for your project, for your organization, because the importance of matching your goals and objectives to those of the funder is critical in order for you to have any kind of level of success. And so all of this requires a ton of research, readings, what possible grants are out there, understanding who they are, what their objectives are, what the goals are, the amount of funding that they have in store for potential grants, the amount of those grants, deadlines, the application forms, and all those things. It's all a process that requires research and a lot of time from your end in order to find that perfect match. So one of those federal grants that I was talking about earlier that are out there is the Community Development Block Grant, the CDBG program. These are federal funds that are allocated for local housing and community development needs. Eligible applicants really only include basically local governments and nonprofit organizations that are looking to improve some sort of housing or community sort of need. The process is annual, but usually beginning in the fall, with funding distributed the following summer. And grants given to initiatives, usually supporting some of these following objectives, such as benefiting the low and moderate income persons, preventing or eliminating slum or blight, meeting urgent conditions that pose a threat to the welfare of the community are some possible grants. I think Jasmine's on the call. Jasmine, does NeighborWorks receive community development block grants? Do you know if that's a source of funding for you guys? It seems like it would be a perfect match for your kind of work.
Yeah, I'm sorry, you caught me in the middle of a bite. So
sorry.
No, that's okay. But yes, we do receive CDBG funds every year. We have to renew that contract, and we use those funds depending on the year, usually to help fund our like down payment assistance programs, or to help fund if there's first-time home buyers, since we are we're a bank, and for lack of a better term, so we can fund first mortgages for people who may not be able to qualify at normal banks. And so that's usually what we use our CDBG funds for.
Okay, and what is that process like, the application process? Is it a pretty lengthy application, short one? What does that process look like? And I know you guys have a ton of experience with this, so I'm sure it's not as a crazy process for any one new person coming in trying to do this, but what is that like for you guys?
Yeah.
Jasmine, do you want me to jump in real quick?
Yeah, go ahead, Maria. I didn't see if you were on the call because it's like,
oh, this is awesome. I'm glad you're in the call, Maria.
Application.
So yeah, thanks for asking, Jesus. So NeighborWorks has been receiving community development block grant dollars for about 36 years now, and it's a competitive process, so it's not ever a guarantee. And there's particular categories that you can apply for. Some are for housing, some are for social services. It's not a difficult application process, but it will ask a series of questions to make sure that you meet the criteria. Then it's submitted to the city, and then the city submits it to a committee that's made up of representatives from throughout the city, and they will vote on it. And then it goes before they make recommendations to the city council, and then the city council will make recommendations to the mayor, and the mayor can accept it or decline it, or she can increase it. There was one time, I'll share with you, that we made someone mad at the city. They took away our CDBG dollars, and we made an appeal to the mayor's office, and she reinstated the dollars. And so it's a competitive process. They only have about $4 million a year, and the requests are about $10 million.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, thanks for sharing a little bit about your experience in applying for these critical funds that are important for our community and for the work that NeighborWorks is doing out here as well. So thanks for your input. Does anyone have any questions about these community development grants now that we have some experts in the house that can help us maybe know more about the process?
I'm just going to make a comment. So it's like, it is a sub-award, right? So the federal government gives this to cities, and then other organizations or like nonprofits can apply for this sub-award. So if like NeighborWorks, it concentrates here in Salt Lake City, right? But there's other organizations that might actually do works like emergency repairs, for instance, like Assist, and I'm the board in Assist. And they go to like West Valley and like Taylorsville and all the different cities, and they request for CDBG funds in all those cities. And CDBG, like other like federal funds, because like, again, they give these sub awards to the city, they make it that is participatory. So in the past, because like CDBG was like started, I think it's like 1974. But before that, there was no public participation, and a lot of bad things happened. A lot of like demolitions, a lot of what the federal government did actually, and a lot of what cities did, it was like without much public participation. So that's kind of like they made it so the public knows, how much is spent in every single programs. So it might be like how much for NeighborWorks, right, every year, and they make it so people can actually comment on these things.
So Evis, the only thing I would add to that is municipalities, that entitlement cities are the only ones that receive the money. So they have to have a population of more than 50,000 to receive that funding. And you're right, there's a lot of, you have to have a lot of transparency, and CDBG funds are restricted to serving populations for 80% and below for us. But also departments within the city can apply for those funding dollars too. So sometimes they're set aside for curb and gutter improvements, to make sidewalks accessible, those types of things. So nonprofits like us have to also compete with those departments.
That's really good to know. Thanks for sharing your knowledge, Maria and Evis, on these community development block grants. Any other thoughts or comments before we move on from anyone else? Or students, if you have any questions about these. And thanks, Annie, for sharing the link to Salt Lake County's CDBG information. So it's on the chat in case you have questions about it or want to learn more. It's a great resource for that as well. Okay. So Evis, sorry.
Yeah.
This is yours. All right, go ahead.
So, I mean, I don't really know much about these specifically. I think that Ken like added this because he know more about the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. So this is something that you can like check out, but it's just like how to find different kinds of like funding sources. And there's, you know, in the U of U, you can find more resources as well. But I will say that, again, you can register for many of these things, and some of them could be at the federal level. But I would try to find something that is like more niche. So for example, if you're interested in art, so checking things out from the National Endowment for the Arts, for instance, or if you are interested in health, maybe you can check out the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. So I think that you can see all these different opportunities, but first of all, you should ask yourself when you're like in these, you know, types of list, is like if you, if they are, at which scale is this funding? Because I feel that the federal funding is a lot harder to get than local kinds of like funds. So checking things local, you're going to always have more opportunity. And part of it is like, you know, Maria was talking about the competition, right? When you put together like a federal grant in where you're like competing with like everyone out there, then it's going to be very, very, very hard. And making the case of like why in Salt Lake City in the west side we need to do X, Y, and Z is going to be hard, because again, it just, you might have a good topic, but it's like convincing like why this community as opposed to many other communities that we can fund in the United States. So I think that going again for local types of things might be better. And also, like if you go for just smaller things, I think that that's like good to establish again this like reputation that you know how to manage a grant. So that's why NeighborWorks gives this like micro grants, right? Because like once you put something down that you say, well, I got, you know, $500 on this or $1,000 on this, then it would be easier for you to get a $10,000. And when you get the $10,000, then the $30,000 will be easier. Just again, because you are kind of like building yourself up. The other thing is like it is always good to see if you know people in these places that are providing grants and ask a lot of questions. Many of the places that are very well established, they will actually have like a webinar they put together for people, and then you usually will attend that, so you like learn more about what is needed and what is happening. But at the same time, I think that one of the best things that you can do is like to partner with someone that has experience with that particular grant, because, and you know, someone who has been successful. And even though if you're not the primary person there, but it's like maybe you're driving the idea, you can invite people to be part of your team that have had that grant before, because they will be able to see some things that you cannot see by reading, you cannot see by watching the webinars, right? So I think that that's something that it can like really help you to be successful. And the other thing is that, you know, in many grants, you apply a first time and you might not get it, but then you can always ask for, can you give me some advice of what can I improve? Or can you give me some comments of why the committee decided that they were not going to give me the grants? And usually, like if it's like, some grants have this process formalized, and then they will give you comments, and they basically telling you, you know, we were not clear on this, we were not clear on this, we were not clear on this, and because of this, we didn't fund you. But if you implement those changes into the future, then you are like very likely to actually like obtain that grant. And sometimes you might need to apply 2 or 3 times. I feel that after 3 times, maybe you get a little discouraged. At least that personally, that's what I feel. But you know, people are successful after trying several times and after incorporating the changes. And if somebody doesn't just give you just, you know, some recommendations of how to improve, you can just again ask for that. That is like perfectly fine. The other thing is that at least like here in the University of Utah, there might be people, now that you have a student ID, there's like people that you can contact that might have like experience with particular grants, and they will actually read your might read your grants, and they just give you some comments about, you know, and you know what to improve. And I guess that if you cannot like partner with someone that have gotten the grant before, you can always ask them to review it just as a favor, because again, they will be able to see some things, even though they might not be you know, partnering with you in that particular grant. So those are some of my tips, besides like going and signing up here for the Corporation of Public Broadcasting and the U of U grant writing.
And Evie, for some reason that link doesn't work, so just want to make that aware to other people. So that's why I went ahead and added this link from the U of U Marriott Library, because it has pretty comprehensive links to different resources. And also there's a librarian from the Marriott Library who's dedicated to helping folks identify grants. And so if you want to connect with them, their contact information is there too. I think you pretty much covered this, Avis, but I don't know if you want to say something else.
Yeah, well, in terms of like, I think that preparation is like, is everything. For very complex grants, so, you know, grants that are more at the federal level, let's say, it can take you a lot of months to actually do it. And in terms of like work, you might be working like a month and a half, and this is like only on that. So it's a lot, and this is why if it's something like that, it's usually in a big team. So, you know, cities and like organizations like nonprofits might be able to actually dedicate so much time from staff to do this, right? And part of like also you want to specialize, so that's like very important. So if you are in the city or you are in a nonprofit, you want to apply for regular sources of funding because it takes a lot of time. It's a learning curve is like high for like many of these like larger kinds of grants, and you really need to basically know the system. If you're doing like a smaller grant, so obviously it will not be that hard to put everything together, but still it's like if something you think that is going to take you 2 weeks, it maybe in reality it will take you like 6 weeks, right? So it's like you always have to like plan ahead. Luckily for you guys, you have been preparing. So this is like, we already have our mission and our vision. We already have like some of the things that we are going to do. Some of you already have like gotten some letters of support. So we have been working on these little pieces here and there in order to be able to assemble something. So we have been preparing, but part of the things that you have done, like we said before, is just defining what is your project, deciding who will benefit. So who is like your audience, but also stakeholders, like community residents that will gain from what you are doing. And also, we also talked about people who might lose, because those are stakeholders as well, right? That if they will lose if you don't do something. So that's a way of also saying that they will benefit actually from your project. And then in our case, it will be easy to identify the funding source. So it will be like the grant from NeighborWorks, but usually if you were going to actually like be looking for that. You know, it will take you some time to identify. And as I said before, it's important that you contact the funders just to like learn more about it, see if there's any webinars coming up, and things like that. Maybe even requesting feedback, but although most places probably will not do that. That's why I was saying that maybe finding people who got the grants, it will be better than actually contacting an officer in these organizations. I mean, they might be able to help you, right? But they cannot give you a lot of peer review because that's kind of like a conflict of interest. Like they did it for you, they didn't do it for somebody else. So that can be like kind of problematic for them. So again, they will refer you to the right guidelines and other things that you need. Of course, knowing the deadline is like the most important thing. So don't wait, 5 minutes before to submit it, because it could be that everybody's submitting at that time. And I'm not kidding. And the whole website collapses or something like that. It does happen. Especially a lot of academics leaving things for last minute, and just like being able to, when it says like determine the personnel needs, I think that it is broader than that. I think it's about knowing in what you are going to spend the money as well. Because a lot of people, I think that this is the main issue with many organizations that are small, that they're like, we need money, we need money, we need money. But the question is like, for what you need money? And you need to verbalize that very well, right? So we want this money so we can hire someone. We want this money so we can put our websites together. We want this money so we can do X, Y, and Z. You need to have a reason of why you're, asking for the money. It's not like you're going to ask for money because your project is great, but you're not telling me the for what. That's very important. And like, it's also important the timeline. So it's kind of like showing, like if you have a project that is going to last 9 months, you should be able to say, the first 2 months, we should be here. And the next couple months, we are going to be here. And then by the time that it's like the 9th month, like maybe like a month before, you're already starting the reporting process, because like, again, anybody that gives you money, they also have to report to a foundation or to like the people that give them the money to begin with. So they need some kind of reporting saying, yes, this is what I did. And if you have a timeline, it's a lot better, because the issue is that you're like, yeah, I'll do it later, especially when you're in a team. But like, if you have like those states that these are your goals and this is what we're going to accomplish, it's like much easier to be a leader in that particular context.
Oh, there we are. All right, so moving on to the actual writing the proposal. And I think this is like a really fun, creative process. At least for me, it is. Thinking out loud and then starting to put into writing your ideas and what exactly it is that you want to achieve through that proposal and the potential funds that may come your way. And so there are at least, 4 different sections to that proposal that need to be well written and clear and succinct. And matching again the objectives, goals, mission of the organization that is trying to provide this funding to you. But the first piece is that statement of need. It's that piece of writing where you articulate why you need the resources and what do you plan to do with, what questions are you trying to answer, how does this fit into existing research, or how does this sort of connect to practice and reality? What are some data to show that your idea, reason, rationale is compelling enough of resources and support from the funder? The reason why the proposal, ultimately should be supported. And so this often is that very first section on that proposal of, if, for example, recently I applied for a grant to understand the COVID-19 effects on people experiencing homelessness and the collaboration that takes place locally. My job was to highlight the reality that people who experience homelessness are disproportionately being affected by the pandemic. And in order to respond to the needs of people who experience homelessness, we need to collaborate, and collaboration is hard. And so we need to understand what that process is looking like and what we can do to better improve that process, so that organizations can then go back to better supporting this very vulnerable community. So it's got to be super clear. It's got to be sort of compelling, and there's got to be some measurable objectives to your overall work that you're trying to achieve. So again, this statement of need is super, super critical. And then you move on to section 2, which is your approach. And that's specifically the method and process of accomplishing your goals and objectives. And specifically, how is it exactly that you're going to implement your work? I know on the research side, we talk about specific methods of analysis and like the data collection and who are we going to approach, community stakeholders and the like. In your case, if you're implementing a specific project, then it's really talking about what exactly that project is, what are the various components, how long it's going to take, and who's going to play what role and in what dimensions and to what degree. And just again, connecting that approach back to, to that statement of need. You know, so if you're highlighting the need, and then you've got to move on to explaining, you know, how you're going to approach your specific, you know, issue and in the project that specifically you're trying to implement. Every proposal almost always also requires that you have some method of evaluation. So this is our third section of that proposal. So being able to explain to the funder how you're going to know that your goals and objectives were met. And here, hopefully you are going to be using some of the ideas and skills that you've been learning in this class of thinking very technically and specifically about the measurements of those results, of how you're going to know that you are making a difference and that you're making an impact. And so again, there's so many different levels of analysis that you can, you know, throw into any kind of method of evaluation. But often, you know, community work starts at the very individual level, trying to understand the degree to which your program project idea is really making a difference in people's lives. And I also at the same time have to say that it's so hard to do that, you know, to be able to make an assessment of the degree to which that difference is happening, but it's possible. And there's been a lot of evidence of efforts to do that. And things such as narratives, you know, speaking with people, getting their experiences, their how they're sort of improving in their life, you know, as a result of your intervention, could be potential ways that you might be able to show that your project or your idea is really having some measurable impact in your local community. The last piece on here about writing the proposal is about the credentials, and it's information about the applicant in order to show that you have the skills, the ability, the know-how in order to implement the project. So here you got to talk about not just your education, your training, the degrees that you've been able to achieve through higher ed or other sort of community programs, but also talk about your work experience, your ability to, or experience having worked in those areas that you're proposing to implement as a result of this grant. As well as the resources that you have available at your disposal in order to make this work happen. And so, for example, something, you know, you can tap into is the support of local community stakeholders, having letters of support from them, statements of support, saying that or attesting to that your work is important, and that they are committing resources, staff, time, physical location in order to make this proposed effort work out for the good of the local community. So again, the credentials is also an incredibly important piece of that proposal that you would have to put together. Okay, and then some additional tips on writing the narrative And so the narrative typically must satisfy the following questions. And this is part of that section we were talking about, the statement of need, as well as other sections of what do you want, what concern will be addressed, and why is it important, who's going to benefit, and how, what specific objectives can be accomplished, and how will results be measured, how this funding request relates to the funder's purpose, objectives, and priorities, and who are you as an organization, and how do you qualify to meet this need. So again, being able to do your research and really understand who it is that you're trying to approach for these resources, and being able to convey clearly that your project, your idea, your organization's efforts are a perfect match and just meshes so well with the ultimate goals of that organization. And so being able to use some of their own wording and language. For example, something I do when I see a grant proposal or grant application or call for proposals, I like to take a close look first at that proposal, highlight sort of keywords that the funder is consistently using in order to understand their language, in order to understand how they're sort of approaching the ideas that they're trying to convey as sort of critical to that funding opportunity. And then I use some of those words back in my own proposal to let them know that I understand what they're trying to convey, what their purpose is, and to know that I'm speaking their language ultimately in putting together this proposal, that we connect, that we sort of are a good synergy for them. And so ultimately, again, aligning the project with the purpose and goals of the funding source is critical because it determines how well your submission will interest reviewers. And that's another piece I don't know we've talked a lot about, but at the other end of this process, there are reviewers, people who are going to be getting your applications and taking a close look and using often a rubric that is going to then be used to assess the degree to which your application is meshing well with what they're trying to achieve. And often, actually, these rubrics are also put out along with, or maybe not necessarily the rubric, but the criteria by which the funder is going to be assessing your application. And so if those criteria are not public, then that's the question that you might want to ask the funder to say, hey, what sort of criteria is the organization using to assess applications? And then make sure that you are satisfying and that you are taking those criteria into account when putting together your specific narrative and overall application.
Jesus?
Yes.
I just wanted to make a comment, if you could go back on that, just having been a writer and having been a reader for these, is when you're responding to these questions is to, for example, for where it says, what do we want? We always start out with NeighborWorks is requesting $1 million to support our Affordable Housing Mission Investment Fund. The $1 million will serve as matching funds. So specifically answering those questions, the population that will benefit will be families 80% and below who live in Salt Lake City zip codes, such and such and such. Answering the questions, often when I read these, I get a lot of fluff, and I don't get a lot of, they don't answer the questions. And so, we still go through that sometimes as an organization because different staff participate in grant writing. And I'm like, you need to answer the question first. It's really important. And, practice brevity, I think, is always important too.
Yeah, that's a really good point. In fact, often funders will put out a sample narrative or sample application with very specific questions that they want answered as part of the narrative. So these are just, again, sample questions that you often have to satisfy as part of a proposal. And these questions may just be worded a little bit different by the funder, but they are almost always, wanting to know about, what concern you're going to address and what results are being measured and what exactly do you want. And I think Maria is so right. It's so crucial to not do a lot of fluff and just run around the bushes, but actually answer the question. What is it that they want to know, and start your first sentence with a response to that direct question and then elaborate after that. But again, yeah, those funders will typically release, hopefully some sample applications, as well as what exactly they're looking for in those narratives. And I would say just respond to those questions and don't deviate from that, because again, you're going to have reviewers who are looking just for that specific information that is a part of the application that they're looking for. And if you don't answer any one of those questions, where you're losing points, and it's going to just reduce your chances of winning that grant. So thanks, Maria, for pointing that out. All right, Evis, you want to jump on this?
Yeah, so we're talking about just the time of writing the proposal. I think that budgets are very important, and this can tell really the funder, like if you can, what are you trying to do in a way, but like, can you accomplish it, right? So budgets are really key, and this is one of the things that they will concentrate on. So they want to first of all, like, know if you're saying that you're going to pay staff to do X, Y, and Z, or you are going to spend this much in materials. So they want to, the question that they will be asking themselves is like, can this person actually accomplish this with this budget? And that's like a question that you have to also answer honestly. I think that for people that are getting started, they often underestimate what some things cost, right? And I think that that's always a bad idea, right? Because then if, let's say that, I don't know, like for your home, you are going to get your kitchen done, right? And then you cannot find a contractor for the price that you said, then you're going to be in trouble, right? So maybe you want to think about a variety of places. And this is why, like in federal grants, you're always also asked to provide like 3 cost estimates for something. So if you're a farmer, they will ask you, what are the 3 models for tractors, or maybe there's 1 model of tractor, but 3 providers that, or people that have that particular tractor, just to get an idea of like the range of like what sometimes might cost, right? So you always want, or it's better just to kind of allocate more money than ended up not having the money that you actually like need. And in this case, I would probably pick also like a middle range. So the recommendation of getting 3 is always like good, but the idea of like getting those 3 is that you can know of which one is the low one, which is the highest one, which one might be in the middle, to make sure that it's like actually like reasonable. And then the other thing is that you want your budget to be consistent with what you said that you wanted to do. So let's say that if you are doing like an oral history project and you really need to buy a DSLR camera, right? Where you can do like a video, and that will make sense because that's like directly linked with your project. But let's say that you want to do an event and buy a camera just, for the event, that doesn't make any sense, right? So you need to figure out if it's, again, consistent with what you are trying to do. And we already talked about just having like the sufficient budget. But another thing that the applications usually have, because they again have the questions of like, who will benefit and what is the need that you're trying to fill, they literally will have those questions. So one of the things that you will have is like a little table with a budget, and then there will be something that is called like the budget narrative, right? So that's kind of like where you're explaining what is like happening, and that's where you put like the detail. For example, for objective 1 that I have, I will spend this money in X, Y, and Z. For objective 2, I spend, this or that. Not that you have to organize the budget in 1, 2, and 3, but that's kind of like more an example of like an explanation. And then, many times they will have their own forms that you have to do, and they might have like even separate spreadsheets that you have to fill out. And many times these spreadsheets are just depending again of the type of grant, but they could be highly complex. They might have, like, if you are adding personnel, something like that, they might have like how much this is a benefit for these people, you know, how many hours. So it would be like lots of things that you have to put in there. So larger organizations might use like have the help actually of an accountant to like look at these spreadsheets and just making sure that everything is like making sense. And then it says here like to don't forget the in-kind support, but that's something that not all organizations accept. So you need to figure out if the organization that you are applying to, if they actually accept in-kind support as matching. And also that's another one, because Jesus like talked about like matching funds, or I think it was Maria actually that talked about matching funds, matching the $1 million, right? that NeighborWorks requested. So in some occasions you are required to provide 50%, just depending. Sometimes it's like 51%. So it's like you have to provide more than you actually will be giving. And there's different ways that they might accept that or not. So it could be that you need to get it from another grant. Sometimes matching funds is like you could actually use salary that somebody else might get in your organization already as a matching fund. And sometimes you can, or matching funds. And then sometimes you can add in kind. So you can say, okay, so an organization is going to volunteer, and you know, all my students are going to volunteer, and all of them are working the whole semester on this. So I can match that, be $25,000, right? But I have to check if they actually will accept that or not as an in-kind support. Many organizations might not, but in this case, because again, it's an important 2 elements to learn about, matching, which is like providing at least 50% of what you're getting in kind. So for our grant purposes, that will be important, that you show hours of volunteers. And here in Utah, it's about $12. So you actually calculate, you know, how many people for how many hours, $12. And multiply that, and then that's how you get your matching funds. And then so you might have like the supporting materials in the grant, which is like the letter of someone saying, I am willing to provide these volunteers, or I'm willing to, I don't know, like whatever it is, right? So it's kind of like the letter of support. Sometimes you might add also like what I said of the cost estimates. So if you have like catering, you might add like 3 cost estimates for that, and add that in the appendix. But it depends what they want. So just always make sure that you actually, the supporting materials is what they want, because a lot of the time you have like so many pages and they don't want all this stuff, you know? So it's always good to know ahead of time. Sometimes you might need authorized signatures. I see that, you know, more like digitally now these days, or not at all. But again, this is something that might be required. And sometimes there's levels of people that might have signatures. Again, many of them will be like mostly digital signatures, but it could be that it's like, if it's a large organization, there might be several people that say, yeah, this is okay. And then just find out what are the guidelines, and I will start actually from there, just getting the guidelines and know what they want and what is needed. So many times you will be given a submission checklist. Not always. Sometimes it's like with the application, and sometimes it's like kind of a separate document that you go and make sure that you have all these things. This will be more true of like very complex grants that you have to do so many things that it's just probably easy to miss. That if you miss a form, because sometimes there's like, you know, forms and forms and forms and forms, and you might have missed one. So that's why they provide the submission checklist. We don't have that for this grant that you guys will be doing, because it's like, it's not that complex. And then you can always like follow up with the funder on like, you know, status or evaluations or outcomes. Most times, like if it's a big grant proposal, they might just send you an email about these. But most times I think in just general, big or small, the funders tend to be a little bit silent, and people start getting anxious, right? So I think that you can always like email someone that is like the officer, just that is like in charge of this, and they can give you a general idea. I don't know if anyone has like any stories of like lost applications or anything like that, but that would be like a good idea to follow up, just in case somehow you fell through the cracks. That has happened to me with other things, not with grants. But you know, that's a good reason of like just following up, just in case, especially if you didn't get an email saying like your grant has been submitted, or like a reply in an email saying thank you for your grant. So it's like if you send it to a space, right, and space never gets back to you, that might be a good idea to just check.
Eva's, just one tip on that is when we send out our request letters to banks or to foundations, the last paragraph, and I know these are a little bit different, we always say, you know, I appreciate your consideration and will contact you in 2 days to respond to any questions you may have. So if you're, again, if you're submitting via email or to someone, that's always a good thing to do, is to, like you said, is to follow up, because even with government grants, you might send them up through a portal, especially like HUD and others, and you know, they get lost. With Salt Lake City, they lose a lot of things, and so always follow up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that as this says here, it's like you can also like reiterate your interest, right? And you can always find a couple people that know that you're applying. So even ahead of time, you can say, I will be applying for this, right? So then the people can like know you from previous emails. And if you are emailing again, then they're more likely to say, hey, yeah, I remember you.